kids or poor white kids are streamlined out of the school system because they just don't fit. And this is the crisis that we have in terms of our public education system here in an incredibly rich country. So I want to introduce Mac. Not sure where you are. Oh, sorry. We haven't met. And you're going to talk about the school, Save the School Shelter.
Save the Schoolhouse.
Sorry, Save the Schoolhouse. Thank you.
Hello everyone. How's it going? This day, just to start, this day raises a lot of emotions for me. I was born in a fairly privileged background, but I seem to have spent about 3/4 of my life in and out of visiting friends, family, people I work with in jails. And I think it's really amazing to hear that statement from in jail and to remember that there are active committees in all the federal pens right now who've been on strike, who have not been eating today, that the reforms to the women's prison system wouldn't have happened if all those women hadn't died in the prison for women in the 70s and 80s, and that this is about struggle, a struggle that is being led from inside, and a struggle that will one day be victorious, because a wall is just a wall, as Asada has told us. So I think Hassan said it well, and other speakers, jails are the social service left to us in this country. We've seen it for hundreds of years with indigenous people, but this is what the government builds to house people who do not have housing. When you are poor, when you are color, when you're queer, when you're a woman, when you're living with HIV, this is the social service that this government will give you. Is that jail there, that jail where men rot every day in the most crowded, worst conditions of any jail in North America. That is social services. And I'm here today about two campaigns that we're doing in OCAP, the Ontario Coalition Against Poverty, around saving the shreds of social services left to give dignity to poor people. The first is the schoolhouse shelter. How many people here know about the schoolhouse shelter? Excellent. Mark those names down, someone may get a point. The schoolhouse shelter is the only wet shelter in Toronto. It is the only shelter where someone who is poor and homeless can go and have a drink at the end of a hard day of scuttling around from service to service, of working in shitty low-paid jobs, of surviving the day as a poor person in the city. That shelter is being shut. The Liberal councillor, Christine Wong-Tam, who first supported the shelter, has turned her back on us. She has stabbed us in the back, and she is now heading the fight to close that shelter down. Any day now, that shelter, 55 beds for the tens of thousands of homeless in the city. Well, has that ever mattered? They just take longer to stab you in the back, and they say nice things while they do it. Anyways, and actually that's a good point, because it is 3 levels of government that are killing social services. One of them is so-called liberal government. It's not about who's in power. It's about a new period of time where we're losing social services, and as a result, people are being locked up. Anyway, sorry, I got distracted. Back to the schoolhouse. The schoolhouse is being shut down. They've been trying to move the residents out. They've been using the so-called Streets to Homes program, putting people in, under-housing people in crappy private housing. 9 times out of 10, the people are back the next day, back in the shelter, because they cannot be housed where they're being housed. They're being moved out to the suburbs. They're being put in with shithead landlords who kick them out the next day. They're being underhoused, and as a result, they're coming back. But the city has vowed to shut this shelter. Well, we are saying no. In OCAP, we've said if you're going to shut it down, we are going to occupy it, and we are going to keep it open. I invite you to join us next Thursday. We will be holding a community meeting at the Parliament Library just west of here at Parliament and Gerrard to try and keep the shelter open at 6 o'clock. We will be providing childcare, snacks, and TTC tokens. And then we will be holding a rally on Thursday, August 23rd at 5 o'clock. It's going to be at Moss Park, at Queen and Sherbourne, which is just west and south of here. We will be providing some refreshments, and it's BYOB. Because if rich people can drink and middle class people can drink, then damn it, poor people can drink too. And we will not let them police us out of police our communities into prisons by condemning certain behavior in certain communities based on class and race, gender and sexuality. I also just want to finish another social service, and this is why I was talking at 3 levels of government. It's easy to hate Ford. It's easy to hate Harper. They're openly racist, classist pricks. But the Liberal government is following the same agenda. The agenda that's being followed around the world in the name of austerity. The agenda of screwing the poor, of screwing the global south, of screwing Indigenous people. And they are cutting the community startup. The community startup is one of the few decent benefits for people on welfare. It allows you $799 when you move, when you need some money to get a new home, when you get out of jail and you need to find first and last month's rent so you can get a place to live because you've just gotten out on the streets. When you get out of jail and you need some money to get into a job program to find work so you can get off of the crap that they feed people on, give people on welfare. Well, that program is being slashed. It has already been officially cut. They're going to be cutting off the benefits any time now. We are fighting to save those benefits as well. And we will be holding a demonstration in October or November of this year. I ask you to keep your eyes open. We're working with our community partners, and we are fighting to save these benefits. Again, I just want to say, the cutting of welfare, the cutting of housing, the cutting of programs in poor communities is a flip side of jails. We've seen it in the United States. When they cut programs in poor communities, they increase the number of cops. We see it here. When Floyd says that there's a shooting out in Scarborough, and the way to deal with that is to attack immigrants who are coming into the country. The way to deal with that is to put more cops on the streets. That is bullshit. Thank you. And we will not let them live with that bullshit. We will be on the streets, we'll be fighting, we'll be joining our sisters and brothers in jail, and we will be standing up to fight for our communities so that we don't end up behind there along with everybody else who's poor and coming in this country. We will shut the jails down, we will open the shelters, and we will fight. Thank you all very much.
I almost don't want to follow you. Thank you, Matt. So I keep forgetting to mention that we have an open mic, and if you'd like to speak on the open mic, please sign up with Jessica, holding the clipboard over here. All right, so moving along. The prison industrial complex, right? It's working really, really well. Because right now, we have Corcan in Canada and Wackenhut in the United States, 2 of the biggest profit-producing companies that buy up prisons, right? And when you buy a prison, there's no regulation. So there's no sick days for prisoners, there's no overtime, right? There's really, really shitty pay. And so the prison industrial complex is connected to the military industrial complex and what I call the immigration industrial complex. And also connected to an area that's recently been getting a lot of attention, as it should, and that's around mental well-being or mental health. And so we don't always think about the connection with prisons and mental health or mental well-being. So to speak a little bit more about this, I'm going to introduce Don.
Thank you. And by the way, I will be there fighting with other OCAP brothers and sisters and everybody else to keep the shelter open, because this is not good for anybody. Once it's shut down, a lot of people will be on the street. And a lot of my brothers and sisters who've been in the psycho prisons are on the street now. My name's Don Wright, and I've been trying to fight to close the psycho prisons, which are just somewhat like this jails. And it's a mistake to think of psychiatric facilities as hospitals. They're prisons. A person locked up in a psychiatric unit is a prisoner of psychiatry and the state. And there are a lot of connections between what goes on in the Dawn and what goes on in KMH and what goes on in the psychiatric units of St. Mike's or Mount Sinai or any goddamn psychiatric unit in this country, in the United States or the world. So, as a member of the coalition, Coalition Against Psychiatric Assault that calls for the abolition of psychiatry, which is involved with the prisoner, which is involved with the industrial pharma complex. There's a statement that we put together 8 years ago, and I'd like to read it. There are copies here. And it's called, it points out the connections between the criminal justice system and the psychiatric system, which I prefer to call the psychiatric state.
Yeah.
I need my glasses. We see the psychiatric system and the criminal justice, injustice system as mutually reinforcing approaches that the state uses to control human beings. We recognize that classism, racism, sexism, ageism, heterosexism, and ableism are all implicated in psychiatric oppression. We focus on anti-psychiatry activities while highlighting the connection among the oppressions. To that end, we demonstrate do non-violent civil disobedience, speak out, and distribute information. Our groups include primarily ex-inmates, as well as other anti-psychiatry activists, as well as prison abolitionists. We see the connections between the psychiatric and criminal justice system. Prisoners of both systems are locked up against their will. Prisoners of both systems are denied access to information, wanted services, visits, sex, the media, and public at large. Just as people die in prisons, people die in psychiatric institutions through drug or overdoses and improper mixing of drugs. In both systems, public investigations do not occur. Both systems use solitary confinement, including the down jail, sensory deprivation. I lost my point here. Sensory deprivation, if I can, and forced transfers or means of control. Just as women in the prison system are subject to extra oppression, women in the psychiatric institutions are subjected to coercive treatment, more electroshock, more damaging drugs, and longer confinement. In both institutions, lesbians and gays are doubly oppressed. Both systems use coercive treatment, such as drugging and shocking, without informed and free consent. Both systems deny the need for AIDS, education, prevention, and treatment. Both systems claim to be benefiting society while actually promoting hierarchy and oppression. Both systems claim to be helping the prisoner while instead punishing and controlling. There are many humane and more effective ways to help people in crisis. As examples, we propose these alternatives to prisons and psychiatric institutions, such as crisis and healing centers, community justice circles, residential therapeutic houses, supportive housing, and decriminalization of drug and petty offenses. Resistance Against Psychiatry and the Coalition Against Psychiatric Assault are anti-psychiatry organizations which oppose brutality and violence everywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Absolutely. So there are copies of the statement that John just read that are on the table here. Thank you so much for that. So some of the best artists and some of the most creative insight that I've ever been introduced to, had the privilege of being introduced to, have been from people inside. I've met some prolific artists. I already talked about Pete Collins. There's some guys that I know that are in Joyceville, that are in Bath and Collins Bay, who are absolute fantastic artists, as well as in Grand Valley, lots of women. And so one of the things that prisons are designed to do, they're designed to deprive you of liberty. And that deprivation of liberty is supposed to kill the human spirit, right? But one of the things that I admire most about people who are on the inside is the resilience in which they can use their creative voice as an outlet for communication. And so leading into this training, we have a fantastic performer. Let me introduce Jean Wong.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here. I haven't been at Prisoner Justice Day for a few years, so it's amazing to be back. And it's actually the perfect timing for me to do a piece here, because these days I spend a lot of my time in theater. And the reason I am focusing on theater is I believe that there are so many voices, and some of them are here right now, that deserve a space to be reserved and a space to shine. And this next play that's coming up is actually about imprisonment. It's about a queer woman of color who gets thrown in prison and interrogated. And even more importantly, it's a piece that's going to have a huge stage. It's at Harborfront Center. It's called Hiding Words for You, and I'm going to do an excerpt from it. What the setup is that essentially this woman has been in prison for 3 days. She hasn't eaten, she hasn't been given water, and what she does to survive is she thinks about the past, and she thinks about people who have been in prison before her. So what she thinks of is San Francisco, and she thinks of Angel Island. And what people who were in prison there did was they took the prison walls and they carved poems into the walls of what they were thinking and what they were feeling, and that was their way to, you know, hold on and to express themselves. So the main character in this play, Grace, that's what she does. She writes a poem on a wall, and this is what that poem says. Suffocate me, and I will still find ways to breathe. Starve me, and I'll hold my hunger, hoping for reprieve. Imprison my body, and I will still be free. 'Cause I already know safety can vanish. A gold mountain sits right on top of me, buried like those before me in history. I sit on the cusp of understanding what choice in life could be. Darling, I need you to speak. Show me hope. Show me a path. Show me questions I need to ask. Please, one day, read this poem, stitched from threads of a textured past. Help me rise from ash. That's from Hiding Words for You. Thank you.
Jean. Much appreciated. So, often when we do this work, we think about how society labels and targets people, specifically people who do a particular type of work. And this particular type of work is often targeted, stigmatized, looked down upon, fawned upon. People are made to feel like they're less than, like they're second-class citizens. So it's really important that we also remember that sex workers don't deserve any less than any of us here. Right. And there's absolutely no shame in a vocation that anyone chooses to do, regardless of the color of their skin or where they live. And so I'm going to introduce someone who I have for a very long time admired, who's a staunch activist, and who I think for many, many years has fought and spoken their truth in the face of adversity. So, Monica.
So hi everyone, I'm Monica Forster. Okay, she's filming. Hi everyone, I'm Monica Forster from Maggie's. I'm the engagement coordinator. I'm an active 25-year sex worker in Toronto. Wow, I've worked all over Canada and the States. So Maggie's is currently in the fight to decriminalize the laws within sex work, so sex workers can work with dignity and safe surroundings, and to be empowered from their work. So Maggie is a supporter for the Prisoners Justice Day and stands in solidarity with other agencies and prisoners around the awareness, the treatment of prisoners incarcerated here in Canada and abroad. Maggie, like others, rally that prisoners are entitled to human rights, human dignity, equality for all persons incarcerated. As we all know, prisoners only institutionalized people, ruin lives, families, health, and in some cases suicide and death. As a sex worker and part of the sex work community, and I'm shaking, so I'm going to sit down. Sorry, this is my comfort zone. As we all know, prisoners are, as sex worker and part of the sex work community, many innocent sex workers are jailed for doing honest work. The government controls our ability to work safely, work dignity, and to allow us to live productive lives. Many sex workers continually jailed for what they see as work, and like others, to pay rent, bills, feed families, and to live. Sorry. As we all know, and it has been documented that sex workers of color and Aboriginal women, or just sex workers in general, are the most targeted and incarcerated in jail. Migrant sex workers that come here to work are, I can't even read my own writing. In various areas of the adult entertainment are jailed for up to 2 years and then deported, which is inhumane. Trans women sex workers are housed in male jails, which need to be changed. They are mentally and physically abused by jails and are stripped of their identity, their gender. Trans women are now being jailed in a West detention, where they are experiencing harsher discrimination from the guards and put into the hall because they're trans, and they're not allowed to access doctors for hormones or demand safer sex, condoms and stuff. And when they are put into the hall for many weeks and then put back on the range. We need to rally for safer spaces for trans people that are incarcerated. We, the people in jail, do not solve anything but make things worse. We demand more community programming and funding to empower people's lives, more affordable housing and employment programs, instead of more super jails or court incentive programs that just set people up for failure. As we rally for justice today, let's take a moment to remember the lost lives and the lives still here in jail, and that Prisoner Justice Day is every day for people incarcerated. Thank you. So at our drop, we have a weekly drop-in. Maggie's has been around for 25 years, advocating for the equality of sex workers, men, women, trans, whoever. And we, the women in our drop-in, have expressed some of the experiences they've experienced while being housed in jail. So I'm just going to read a few of them out, and then we can go from there. Okay, people are created equal. We can hold beliefs and, oh God, I can't even read that, and traditional ways. We are not to be discriminated against. It doesn't infringe on other people's rights. The world is vast and we need to do what we need to survive. Social conditions have deteriorated that some people do not have choices of the so-called normal family conditions taught by Christian vows or from the weakest world. No one has the right to say prostitutes or transgender person is immoral, and when no law is broken, why do we have to be story. Why do we have to be hurt by people in authoritative positions like police, lawyers, politicians, and media personnel? Churchgoers don't acknowledge prostitutes in the Western Bible and spoken favorably. Homosexuality exists and may be held in formable accounts in history, even if not biblical, such as political, royal lineage, use transgender homosexuals, for example, spying when they don't even... Okay, so that's when. Maybe I should have edited some of this stuff, but no, it's real, it's theirs, and no. Sex work is not a high-risk job. Protecting ourselves from the police and Immigration Canada and the Children's Aid Society is what endangers us. Sex workers want to work in the and be recognized as leaders in the movement to end all forms of state control and violence. Here we go. Incarceration women people for trying to make a living in a society that won't allow them the same opportunities and counterproductive and waste of taxpayers' money and just planning wrong. The intimidation and bullying and abuse, our sense of inequality, justice, and internal anguish, then we are let out and expected to be upstanding, controllable members of society with a criminal record that hustles lenders our ability to change our lives. So these are some of the people that wanted to express some of their feelings. As someone who was in jail before, it was the most frightening experience I've ever had. Not only frightening, but to be ostracized of who I was, to call me him when I was a her, to make laugh, to show me around the jails and laugh at me, to put me in populations that were unsafe, and then put me in populations where were still unsafe. It was the most scariest moment. We need to push for trans people to be put in jails that are safe and that give them dignity and to serve out their time. And once again, I just want to rally again to make sure people are aware of what's going on in the courts and that Harper has appealed the decision to allow sex workers to work in a safe space and in dignity. So we need all your help and your voice to make sure that we can push those laws within sex work to be decriminalized. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you for sharing. I just want to remind people there's free water over here. If anyone needs some water, it's over here at this table. So I was thinking about something, right? I was thinking if you give somebody a STEM, then you're just helping promote drug use, right? Right? No? Okay, so if I thought giving out clean rigs was a particularly good idea, then I'm going to increase the rate of crime and recidivism rates in jail are going to go up. No? No, I'm just playing. So why is it that particularly we live in a society that doesn't understand harm reduction and that sees harm reduction as drug promotion, right? And so this is one of the things that I think it's important as well to think about. There's a number of charges that people face and that are related to that people are being targeted because of drug use. So here to shed some light on this a bit further is Arlene.
Hi, my name's Arlene and I'm a frontline harm reduction worker. I'm standing here on August 10th on behalf of Toronto Harm Reduction Alliance as we stand in common resistance, hey girl, with prisoners and more than 35,000 prisoners that sit behind prison walls throughout Canada. Together, we remember those that have passed while behind these bars and those that continue to be locked up while fighting for their freedom and autonomy. As I was trying to think of what I was going to cover for my speech today, an incident at work this week continued to play over and over in my head. And I work with a specific street-involved population that abstaining from drugs and alcohol really isn't necessarily a feasible reality. These folks are highly targeted by the police force and this bullshit, unsafe street laws that excuse their abuse and harassment. One of the men I work with was being harassed and humiliated by an officer as this individual was consuming Listerine in public on the sidewalk. Not only did the officer aggressively confiscate the bottle, but then had to wave the bottle in front of all the passerbyers to show it off to his bros in uniforms. Is rapidly growing. Due to Harper's Get Tough on Crime agenda, this low-income housing system will continue to rapidly grow. On November 6th, Bill C-10 will become law. Despite the dissent from lawyers, judges, indigenous groups, the U.S., and over 300,000 Canadians, Bill C-10 was passed. This bill will further oppress the most vulnerable populations and communities throughout Canada. We are guaranteed to see more people involved in the prison system and more barriers put in place to escape the prison system. It is expected that we'll see at least 1,500 additional prisoners. This bill mimics a failed system that the U.S. has warned us about and will devour monies that could be put towards such initiatives and services that could actually build safer and healthier communities. As the prison system is rapidly growing, we need to work even harder towards supporting harm reduction programs within the prison systems. Inmates that are much more at risk for contracting HIV and hepatitis C within the system, as eliminating drug use and sex within the prisons is definitely not an achievable option. Harm reduction supplies need to be accessible for all inmates. Therefore, new needles, condom distribution, new tattooing supplies need to be accessible to all prisoners now. Today, as people on the outside of these walls, we speak together with those resisting every day behind the walls, that not only today, we will together raise public awareness of the demands made by the prisoners, that changes need to be made to the system and the brutal, inhumane conditions that prisoners experience on a daily basis. Together, we also stand up to continue to struggle for more HIV/AIDS education, prevention, and treatment within the prisons. Together, we demand that we follow in the steps of the Moldovan model, which provides accessibility to harm reduction supplies for all prisoners. We need harm reduction in the prison system now, and we need to continue to work together to create a world where we are free of all prisons. And my little girl's been waiting all day to say that.
Nobody's allowed to be here.
Okay, thank you so much, Arlene. Much appreciated. Harm reduction. Prison house health is public health for sure, so your words are poignant and very telling. So we're going to start the open mic portion of our evening. I want to also give thanks to all of you for staying around. Your time and your presence is much appreciated. Also want to give a very special shout out to the organizers, my friend Joan. Thank you as always. Our sign interpreter, thank you as always. All of the speakers, performers, manning the table, thank you. Much appreciated. Jessica as well, thank you. Let's yell again, absolutely. But what are we going to say? Sorry? No more prison. No more prison. So on the count of three, yeah? 1, 2, 3. No more prison! Okay, come on. I think we can get a little louder than that. This place is huge. I've been inside. It's huge. Okay? 1, 2, 3. No more prison! All right, I can take that. Right. So we're going to start our open mic, and I want to introduce Miguel, who's going to make some connections to what Arlene said.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Miguel Avila. I am a Toronto Community Housing resident, and social housing is a very close thing to me. I just want to say a few things in relation to what Arlene said today, which really touched the activity that currently I'm taking on the streets of Toronto. Arlene was right to say that because she was there to witness when the cops were throwing the Listerine bottle, then they were treating perhaps the user in a friendly manner into her. My name is Miguel Avila, and I am not afraid. I am not afraid of those men in blue. Why? Because we need to hold them accountable. TorontoCopwatch.wordpress.com is the website I have created where anybody can put on their videos and keep those cops accountable. We need to hold them accountable for all the abuses they do against Torontonians. People who marginalize neighborhoods, especially in Toronto community housing, right now, they're being targeted. There is an increasing number of police officers in my neighborhood. Instead of promoting job creation, better education and training for our tenants, they're saying, okay, let's give them more cops, that's the solution. That's not the solution. That's for their own advantages, so they can pay off their mortgages free, faster than anyone else. Anyhow, that's why I want to say these things, that Copwatch is now effective in Toronto, and if anyone who wants to join this movement, TorontoCopwatch.wordpress.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so next on our speakers list, and I just want to add a little caveat before we begin. We're going to be reading out the names of people who have passed inside, and there's some lists that are going to be coming around, and we're going to be lighting candles and just doing a march here on the driveway. We're going to ask, just out of respect for time, people's schedules, if the speakers could please try and keep their comments to 1 to 2 minutes. That would be much appreciated. So next we have, please I apologize in advance if I mispronounce your name, Slava.
Thank you. That's actually probably the best pronunciation of my name, like the most random thing ever, which is great. Awesome. Thank you. Hi everyone. My name is Slava. I'm from the Women's Coordinating Committee for NORML. We are an Indigenous organization here in Toronto. We deal with issues of our political prisoners in Chile, as with our Mapuche Indigenous prisoners that have been jailed because of land claims issues and issues of being able to take back the land, and the fact that all of this continent is all stolen native land, and that they have absolutely no jurisdiction to be able to actually implement their laws, their jurisdiction, and their prisons on our land. That's the first thing that we should mention out of all of this.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm here today because we've done a lot of work in terms of supporting our political prisoners. One thing that we should always remember, though, is that because of the system of repression that we live in and how people are sucked into the judicial system, that every single person who's a prisoner today is actually a political prisoner. A lot of different people go into prison for different reasons. We particularly work with prisoners that have gone in for political dissent, for actual actions that have taken on in terms of changing our society and being able to make something better of it. With our Mapuche political prisoners, our people as Indigenous peoples, we have to reclaim the land in order to be able to reclaim what is ours. Imagining being behind bars and not being able to be related to the land, on top of the fact that they're stealing and contaminating everything that you hold dear. But on top of that, we also should remember the fact that we live in a completely authoritarian system, that therefore we should resist all types of authority in that way as well, in order to be completely and truly free. The work that we've done in the last little while, especially here in Toronto, has been focused on being able to support our political prisoners, not just in Chile, and not just in NORML, which is our territory in southern Chile, or so-called southern Chile, but also support our political prisoners even here locally. And when I speak about that, I'd like to reflect a few things about the fact that there's still political prisoners that people may not know about here in Canada. The most recent cases have been because of our G20 defendants and political prisoners that are currently now in jail. There was a brief mention before about the letters that Alexander and Mandy Hiscox had written in jails in regards to Prisoners' Justice Day. We recently saw the fact that, for example, Kelly Fligback, a 24-year-old woman, was recently convicted of 6 different charges of mischief for her roles in the G20 summit here in 2010. She was condemned to 15 months in jail with three years, I believe, of discount because of the fact that she had already had time served, and 3 years probation. And it's a fact as women within the community that we have been targeted very much so within the judicial system because of our political dissent. Any kind of action to be able to resist this ongoing encroachment to our land and to the system itself, we are the ones that always get targeted the most. And in fact, we can say, out of all the G20 cases, we can say for a fact that the majority of the women who have spent most time in jail and have been convicted most have been women. Most of them have been women. And so we wanted to be able to speak out about the fact that Kelly is right now in jail, and she will be there for the next year. We're asking for people to come out and support. We have an email list going on to be able to subscribe and be able to get information about what's going on with Kelly. We also have a direct email if you want to go visit her, make donations, because going to visit Kelly and the trap calls and everything that has to do with calling from prison is extremely expensive, so we need people to be able to make donations in that regard as well. We also have a letter writing night this Sunday, actually. This Sunday, August 12th, we were handing out pamphlets before at the GSU, which is the Graduate Student Union at the University of Toronto, 16 Bancroft Avenue. Folks, if you've already written letters, it's all good. Keep writing them, but come out to this letter writing night because we need people to come out and also make those donations to be able to fundraise for Kelly, as well as see the amazing films that are presented that night. The films that we're showing shows the repression not just here that's been happening, but also within our communities, within our history as a Pujic and as people from Latin America. The state and the judicial system has not won their war against our people. And it's up to us to keep on making that fight happen. We have to stand here in solidarity with all our prisoners and to say that fuck this prison system, down with these prison walls, and one day we'll all be free if we unite together and struggle together for this common cause. Thank you.
So how's everyone feeling, okay? Yeah? Okay.
Yes! All right.
All right, we have Daniel Johnson next, who is the director of the Saskatchewan chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Okay, Daniel.
Okay. I'm also with the Summer of Solidarity On to Ottawa track, which is a facet of the Occupy movement, which is why I'm in Toronto. But in my capacity with NORML, I felt that I should say, for the last 10 years, every major poll on the subject has shown that a majority of Canadians want marijuana legalized. Most of these polls have also shown that a majority of Canadians want to end the war on drugs approach and bring in all these harm reduction measures that we keep hearing about. The reason why, or at least as far as I can tell, the fact that this is not being done says something, because the laws in a democratic country are supposed to be a reflection of society's values. When the majority of people in a society don't agree with the laws being enforced, that pretty much says that you do not have a democracy, because democracy is supposed to mean majority rule. The theory I have as to why this is, other than simply that we are not a democracy, the reason why they keep taking approaches that pretty much all the evidence shows is making the problem much, much worse is because our legal system, or at least as far as I can tell, our legal system is actually not supposed to make society safer or enforce society's values in any way. Its purpose is to be a giant welfare scheme for lawyers and judges and psychiatrists and police so that they don't actually have to do real work for a living. Now, while I was on my way here, I'm from Saskatchewan and I haven't spent much time in Toronto, and so this kind of got me. While I was looking for this place, I got lost in a different neighborhood and I totally thought I found it. Here's this big brick building with a 15-foot high fence topped with wire, and I thought, wow, this is it, but damn, that building is a lot smaller than I thought it would be. This is supposed to be like a big jail, but it looked kind of small, and then I was walking around looking for some kind of gate. I found there was a play structure, and that was actually supposed to be an elementary school. Like, is this normal here? Like, that's really scary, and that is pretty much all I had to say. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Gary. I'm sorry, Daniel, I apologize. Gary's up next, I apologize. All right, so we have Gary.
I got a phone call today from the Ministry of Labour. See, I've worked 2 different jobs since I came to Toronto a couple of years ago. I'm owed $6,000 for working like a madman. Minister of Labour, I says, I hear there's 1 million people in this province not being paid by the labour laws. And he says, yeah, that's about right. I says, well, the first contractor I worked for got me working 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, but he wanted me to work 7 days a week, 10 hours a day. And then he ripped me off for all my paycheck, and the Labour Board does nothing. I said to this person that called me from the Ministry of Labour, I says, if I was working 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, I'd be out looking for him. I think I might kill him, and he might find me in this jail here for life, and then he could give me free room and board. 1 million people not being paid by the labor laws, and the Labour Board does nothing. Creating poverty. Yes. Nasty bunch. So, the second job owes me $4,000. I quit after a year because I wasn't being paid for my statutory holidays and being shorted on my hours. I found another job, but I was only getting a day a week. So I applied for unemployment insurance. Unemployment says you can't quit your job because you're not being paid and expect to get unemployment insurance. I phoned up the supervisor and I says, look, I can go back to work for that company. Can you promise I'll be paid and the 50 other people there? No, we can't promise you that at all. So we'll give you the unemployment insurance, which they're now cutting down your benefits. You can get up to 30% less. Good goal. Anyway, don't forget the magic. The poor people are holders and keepers of the magic all through history. And when they've got them living hopeless and in fear, then no one sees the magic in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Much appreciated. So before we move on, someone said to me once, because they knew I was active around prison work and working with prisoners and support, and someone said to me, aren't you afraid to have your daughter around those people? Because I used to always bring my daughter down to these vigils. I just didn't bring her tonight because I was hosting. And so when I hear those kind of comments, I wanted to take a look at something like this, which is what the kids here created tonight. And so I just want to give a big shout out to all the kids, all the mothers inside who are separated from their children and who are agonizing because walls separate them, and state laws say that if you're a mom inside, you're not a quote-unquote good mom and you're undeserving of being a mother. So this is what the kids made tonight, and I just want to big up the kids. All right. And next we have Phoenix.
So hi everyone, my name's Phoenix. I work at Maggie's, the Toronto Sex Worker Action Project, and I'm also an active sex worker. I read this speech earlier at the South Riverdale event, and I just thought I would read it again and share it with everyone. So here it goes. Prisoners' Justice Day began several decades ago to remember those who have lost their lives to unjust treatment and lack of care within the prison system. Today it has become much more. It is a day to speak out against the building of new prisons, the overrepresentation of Indigenous and racialized people within it, the detainment of new immigrants and refugees, and the creation of new law and order legislation that will only increase the rates in which our family members, friends, community members, sons and daughters are locked away. It is a day to call out the blatant racism, ableism, sexism, transphobia, and hate that our criminal and justice system spews from every angle. And it is a day to raise awareness about overcrowded cells, human rights violations, and the barriers that those once released from prison face in society. There are so many things that I can say about the prison system, but today I'm here to speak on behalf of Maggie's, the Toronto Sex Workers Action Project. At Maggie's, we believe that no one should face violence or repression from the state, the police, or the prison system. For 25 years, Maggie's have been actively involved with anti-legislation efforts, speaking out against prisons, police, and supporting workers in Toronto. And although I can speak to my own experiences of incarceration, I cannot speak for the thousands of trans, street-based, migrant, and workers of color who on a weekly basis are funneled through the prison system like a revolving door. For many workers, having their occupation criminalized means being picked up and rearrested days after their release for trying to reestablish themselves in order to pay rent, get a new place, or feed their families. At the same time, being in constant fear of police incarceration, of police harassment and violence from the public. In addition, being incarcerated removes workers from their families, communities, and takes them away from any programs or treatment they may currently be engaged in. And as many of you know, this is not just the reality for sex workers, but for drug users, those living in poverty, youth, and those without status. As we stand here today, it is clear that the Harper government will continue to manipulate the public's views on crime and violence against women in order to further monopolize on the prison industry. Not only by pushing through bullshit law and order legislation based on imaginary crime rates, such as Bill C-10, but also conflating the idea of trafficking with all sex work. Over the past year, the use of the word trafficking to describe sex work has risen, and the media and our government have been using it to portray every instance where a worker is involved with a third-party manager, in every instance where a worker relocates, and in any instance where there is any element of control. This is being done to create a moral panic and use the public's views to stop the fight for sex workers' rights and limit the movement of women from the global south. Are we saying that sexual exploitation does not happen? No. But when we speak about trafficking, we need to not only speak about the instances of sexual exploitation, but also the decades of exploitation and trafficking of persons into the hospitality, agriculture, garment, and domestic industries. Ask yourselves why it is that when sex, women, and money are involved, our government would like you to believe that all sex workers are victims in need of saving when they do nothing to help or support migrant workers from other industries, and in fact, allow and help to create the rights and unfair conditions that many find themselves in. The definition of trafficking is very skewed and does not apply to all sex workers and does not apply to all migrant workers. Many migrant workers travel here to work without coercion, and many do not work in exploitative environments. Criminalizing the very industry in which they work and rely on to support themselves only drives workers further underground and limits available options for making money. Sex workers from across the world are very vocal about what we need to live in safety, yet our voices are silenced while the government continues to conflate our work with trafficking to further their anti-sex work and anti-immigrant agenda. Protecting workers doesn't happen by continuing to criminalize the industry that we utilize in order to feed our families and pay our rent, but rather by giving us the power to define our working conditions, by providing better opportunities, and by granting workers status. So today, while we remember those who have fallen victim to the system, let us also remember how they got there. Resisting legislation is preventing and protecting our loved ones from being consumed by the prison machine. And by supporting the full decriminalization of sex work, we are saying no to the incarceration of workers, we are saying no to meaningless bullshit legislation, and we are saying no to the targeting of migrant workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Phoenix. And next we have Sean. Sean? Oh. Sorry, wrong thing.
My name is Sean. I just was released this past Saturday. The things I've seen, instead of them putting the cameras on us, why don't we put the cameras on them? And it just makes me sick. Since we want things to get better, the only way we're going to get better, you know, it's with the help. I called 10 different organizations while I was in jail. Not one of these organizations can help me for when I got out. And all I wanted to do was get my drink of methadone. I mean, right there, that's a chance to relapse. Bring me back into the system. I'm done.